Canada controls a smaller portion of its productive wealth than any other developed nation on Earth. The levels of foreign ownership in Canada would not be tolerated by any other developed country. It would be surprising considering that Canada has an educated population, good infrastructure, and abundant natural resources. The way Canada was built was meant to maintain its independence from foreign powers, the United States mainly. Canada's policy on trade was protectionism as opposed to free trade. Free trade doesn't restrict foreign imports at all, and everything in the country and outside the country is allowed to operate without many restrictions, tariffs, or quotas. Protectionism, on the other hand, puts quotas on goods, for example saying you can only import this many Twizzlers per year. And it also puts tariffs on foreign imports, essentially a tax. The purpose of protectionism is to protect domestic industry, and this has worked out for Canada in the past. Canada has had a strong domestic industry and a valuable currency, as well as other nations that have benefited from protectionism. Nobody denies that Japan has a strong domestic industry, and no well-read historian will deny that the repealing of the Corn Laws played a key role in the destruction of English agriculture. Canada was built to be a protectionist country from its inception. Britain needed Canada to be independent because of the United States. The first truly grand Canadian project was a Trans-Canada Railway, and the purpose of it was to avoid using American railways and make trading within Canada more favorable and cost-effective, and at the time, to bring British Columbia into Confederation. Canada brought in European pioneers by the millions in order to settle the land and bring food independence to Canada. If we were cut off from the world, we would be able to produce enough food to feed our entire population. And the crowning achievement of Canadian protectionism was in the 1980s, where if Canada was cut off from the global markets, we could still have produced enough cars, computers, and other gizmos to maintain a half-decent Canadian lifestyle. I'm not saying that Canada would not have struggled in this scenario, but we could have done surprisingly well. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, Canada was a big player in computer engineering, car manufacturing, and exported tons of refined metals. This coincided with Pierre Trudeau's protectionist policies, where he reduced foreign ownership in Canada from 38% to 27% under the Foreign Investment Review Agency, FIRA for short. This changed in 1994, when Brian Mulroney was elected on the promise that he would open up Canada to free trade. Mulroney destroyed the FIRA and replaced it with Investment Canada. The FIRA would actually put regulations on who could own businesses in Canada. It would prevent monstrous foreign entities from totally dominating Canadian markets. Up to this day, 2019, there have been well over 15,000 foreign takeovers in Canada, including small firms, mining and forestry operations, and manufacturing. No foreign takeover has been rejected in this entire time period, not even one. To put this into perspective, every year around the world, developed nations reject hundreds of foreign offers. When Coke wanted to buy France's soda company, or in China, the French said no. When China was buying too much German industry, the Germans said nein. And when Japan was primed to have its industry be bought up by foreigners, they said no in Japanese. Japanese manufacturing is less than 1% foreign owned, but Canadian manufacturing is over 50% foreign owned. But that 50% figure was gathered in 2001 by Statistics Canada. They stopped taking tally of these things in 2001 because I guess if Canadians did know how much of their industry was foreign owned, they wouldn't be too happy. Which brings me to another topic. Foreign investments in Canada is usually done with capital that comes from Canada. Very little capital is actually brought into Canada for foreign investment, and nobody knows how severe the problem is. The Department of Finance doesn't know, the Bank of Canada doesn't know, Statistics Canada doesn't know, and they don't know because they don't care. I can make theories about where this money comes from, but because no one has done any reasonable investigation on this topic, I can't even make a reasonable guess. But this makes it clear that the federal government doesn't want Canadians to know how much foreign ownership there is in Canada. Every politician will say that Canada needs more foreign investment, but is this true? If you read some of our newspapers, you probably think that investors are avoiding Canada like the plague. Terence Corcoran wrote in the Globe and Mail, "Foreign investors are sharply curtailing their investments in Canada." An article from Canadian Business said, From a US perspective, Canada has not been a great place to invest in since 1991. And Sherry Cooper said in a National Post, net foreign investment in business and real estate has been dampened no doubt by our punitive corporate tax rates. The plain fact is that this isn't true. In the 2010s, which I know isn't over, but in like 2 months it will be, net foreign investment was $150 billion. In the 1990s, it was $126 billion, and in the 1970s, it was $32 billion. Every record for foreign investment has been broken in the past 40 years. In perspective, the only country which surpasses Canada in receiving more foreign investment as a percentage of GDP is the United Kingdom. Depending on your point of view, the best or worst part about foreign investment is that 96% of foreign investment doesn't go to Canadian companies. It goes towards buying them. Investing into a Canadian company would be like giving Tim Hortons a couple bucks for them to get a new coffee machine so that they make more money so that they can pay you back. Stock holding for short. Buying a Canadian company is, well, it's like, it's just buying Tim Hortons. Which happened, by the way. Tim Hortons is not owned by a Canadian. It's a subsidiary of Wendy's. Why is foreign ownership bad? Aside from Canada's 9% unemployment rate, which may or may not be attributed to foreign companies, there is another negative impact. Head offices of companies are usually located in their parent country, and a head office is usually, almost always, where all the best and high-paying jobs are. The talented youth of the nation, the ones who will be looking for these high-paying positions, will leave Canada because all of those jobs are in the United States. And make no mistake, Canada is currently facing a brain drain because of this. And for another thing, foreign firms operating in Canada import, on average, 3 times as many parts, components, and other similar services as similar-sized Canadian companies. Foreign parts used in the United States were 15%, in Japan it's 7%, but in Canada it's well over 50%. This reliance on foreign manufactured goods leaves Canadian manufacturers high and dry. This is also a reason why the unemployment is so high. Canada used to export finished goods like car parts and other gizmos. There used to be a chain from the mines and forests to the manufacturers and then to the retailers. Right now, Canada is exporting raw materials to the United States and other countries. They make the stuff and send it back. This means there is no middleman. We have less to tax, and this is one reason why we have high taxes. It also reminds me of the time when America was exporting raw chicken to China. It was processed there and sent back to America, which is gross. How would you do that? Countries with high foreign ownership are also not big investors into research and development, R&D for short. R&D is basically innovation, new technologies, all that jazz. Companies who invest in R&D do it in their mother country. Apple's not gonna give money to their Canadian branch in order to do some R&D. They give it to their home base in Silicon Valley. And of course, Canadians who want R&D jobs move to Silicon Valley because that's where everything is. Right now, Canada ranks 20th among developed countries in spending R&D as a percentage of GDP. Countries at the top include highly protectionist countries like South Korea and Japan. Go figure. In 1999, Peter Lougheed, former Alberta Premier and key campaigner for free trade, said, "I know people will fall from their chairs to hear me say this, but maybe right now we need to return to the Foreign Investment Review Agency. We need to be more interventionist. The passive approach isn't working. If the present trend continues, we are going to look back at our country in about 3 years and say, what have we got left?" Well, it's been more than 19 years since he said that, and you can drive to a mall and observe that there's nothing Canadian. Almost all retailers are American. You buy a car from Ford or Toyota, you use a television that was made in China, and you use something like Snapchat or Facebook, American social media. Today, Canada has nothing left. What can you do to turn this around? Not much, honestly. Even the so-called far-right People's Party doesn't want to have protectionism. The closest we have to a protectionist party is the NDP, but because they're socially liberal, I can't really vouch for them. But if you're a single-issue voter, why not? Subscribe and like this video. If you don't, I'm gonna cry.